My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project, ably conducted here at our Public Library of Cincinnati. Our videographer and historian, Dennis Daly, on the camera. And I have the opportunity and the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Orson Wade Peck of Cincinnati. Orson, where were you born?
In 1913, August the 1st.
Wow. Where?
In New Lyme, Ohio, Ashtabula County.
Way up in the northeast corner.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'll be darned. New Lyme.
My mother, Luna Fairbanks.
That's another famous name, too.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It's an important name. Fairbanks, Alaska.
Oh, sure.
And all
Sure.
that thing.
Fairbanks weights and measures and all that sort of thing.
There are a lot of things connected to Fairbanks.
That's right.
In fact, one of my daughters' middle name is Fairbanks.
That's nice.
She was interested in talking to me about the Fairbanks, the history
Right.
of Fairbanks.
Right. Have you done some genealogy study on your family?
Oh, yes.
Right. That's interesting. Are you an only child, or did you have brothers and sisters?
Oh, yes, I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
Oh, wonderful family. Oh, my goodness. That's great.
My-
You went to school in New Lyme, did you? Primary and...
New Lyme, Ohio for third grade, and then 4th grade in Rome, Ohio.
Rome, Ohio. Was that nearby, or where is Rome?
Rome is right near New Lyme, next to Ashtabula County.
Okay. I think we need to get out a magnifying glass to find those places.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'm learning a lot. Then when did you go to high school?
New Lyme.
New Lyme had a high school. Very
Yes.
good, very good. Did you, with the brothers and sisters as you had, it must have been a pretty lively family and full of activity and so forth?
Yes, it was. My father died when he was relatively young,
Oh,
and my older brother took the farm over as mentor of the place.
right.
So I kind of grew up under my brother, who is 10 years older.
I see. Uh-huh. Well, so what kind of a farm did you have? What did you graze there?
It was a dairy farm.
Dairy
basic,
farm.
Basic general
Oh,
farm.
yeah.
Dairy,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, growing up on a farm is a wonderful education in itself, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it was a very pleasant and wonderful experience.
Yeah, you learn self-reliance, and you learn about the earth and everything.
Yes, we had a sugar house, sugar shack,
Oh,
and we tapped trees and brought the sap into the sugar house and boiled the sap down to maple syrup,
sure.
and I participated in that.
Wow, that's
As a
interesting,
youngster was.
I should say. Did you cultivate the soil? Did you raise any crops?
Oh yes, we had corn and in those days soybeans was not
Not
the
pr-
principal crop.
No, right,
Corn
right.
was mostly potatoes.
So you worked behind a plow and a horse, a team of horses?
Oh, absolutely. Two horse team, 4 horse teams.
Right.
Then eventually went into the tractor, the old Ford tractor that
Sure.
Henry Ford
How about that?
made.
How about that?
And those old Ford tractors were dangerous to have because
Oh, yeah.
they would upset.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they weren't well balanced, were they?
They weren't very well.
Kind of
And I
top
remember
heavy.
A neighbor of mine got killed on one.
Yeah, I know that was very not uncommon in those days. I remember that you had to crank
Yes,
to start
yes,
the engine.
yes.
And sometimes that crank would kick back and break their arm, or I know I had an uncle that had that happen to.
Well, it never broke my arm, but it would happen.
It would hurt.
You had to hold it a certain way, not
Right.
your thumb.
Exactly.
Uh,
Well, did you have any particular interests in high school, subjects that you were favored of, or hobbies or anything like that?
No particular one. We, of course, played baseball.
Right.
I was on the county championship baseball team. at that
Wow.
time.
Good for you. What position did you play?
Second place.
Second base. Keystone.
Yeah, well,
Oh, that's wonderful. As you grew up, did you, let's see, 1913, boy, you're going way back. That's a long time. So you're 96 years old?
that's correct.
Wow, that is marvelous. So do you remember anything about World War I? You were a small boy then, but
No, I don't remember World War I. I know that my father was registered in World War I,
registered.
and he was never called into service because he was married or whatever.
Yeah, had a big family.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Now, how about your mother?
My mother was Fairbanks, and they got together and had a nice courtship. I have letters of their writing back and forth.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, I should say. Well, all of this sort of thing helped build your mind and your heart and your personality as a boy. That's very strong and very wonderful. As you progress through your primary and secondary education, did you have your eye on college, or what were you looking ahead to as far as the future was?
Well, it's interesting to note that I got into college in a rather peculiar way. It was a depression time,
Oh, yeah.
and Hiram College was my choice of college, simply because this nicely dressed young man came into the farmyard, and at that time my mother had me into a class through the post office.
Oh,
Yeah, and this annoyed me no end. And this young man came into the yard one day and he said, "I'm looking for Orson." And he said, "Your high school principal referred me here, and I'm from Hiram. I'd like to know if you'd like to go to Hiram." So I determined that he had a $50 scholarship for me
wow.
if I behaved myself the first semester. I could renew that $50 scholarship for the second time.
I'll be done. Oh, that's...
So anyway, I had to do a little work in college, so I didn't earn that scholarship for the second time around,
Uh-huh.
the second half of the part of the year.
Well, now that's very interesting. Of course, Hiram was it a religious school at that time? Was that a church school?
Yes, it was.
Uh-huh.
It was, I don't recall too much about
Right.
religion.
Right. Well, as you, did you stick through and graduate from Hiram College?
Yes, I did.
Wow, that's something else.
Yes, I did.
That's wonderful. I haven't met very many people who graduated from Hiram College.
Well, I graduated, and I didn't know what I was going to do after I graduated, but the last year, I decided, well, maybe I could become a teacher. So I obtained a lifetime high school teaching certificate, and at that time, Depression time, you know, they didn't hire teachers. They built new schools, and so there's no job there.
Wow. How about that?
What am I going to do?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, that's interesting. You point out the fact that in the 1920s, you're talking about there was a depression. It seemed like in our history there was a depression every 6 or 8 years, you know. But before the what we call the Great Depression of the 1930s and 40s, there were depressions. And a lot of people don't realize that, how times were hard.
They were.
Right.
It was Depression time.
I should say. Well, now, living without, what age were you when your father died?
Well, I was 13.
Oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the prime time of your learning and ability.
You know, believe it or not, even if we were farm people, my mother was able to take my father to Florida in the wintertime.
Wow.
For a month or two.
Right.
Even a farmer wife.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's wonderful. That's just wonderful. Well, then you got to see some of the country. Did you get to go along on those trips to Florida?
No, I didn't. No.
I see.
I was
You had to stay home?
busy at the farm.
Right, right. Somebody had to run the farm and you had to go to school. Well, now, so here you were, you graduated from Hiram College, and what were you looking ahead to, or how did you move along?
Well, I didn't know what I was going to do. I sponged on my sister, who was in Cleveland at the time, and doing secretarial work, and I was up there wondering whether or not I should continue my college experience, or
Right.
what I could do. So fooled around during the summer, and eventually I noticed in the paper, there was an ad in the paper, a company that was looking for a farm-bred single man who had graduated from college.
Wow.
So that seemed that it was me.
Fit you perfectly.
Yeah. So it happened to be that it was a Liberty Mutual insurance company.
Oh, yes.
And I went in and applied for the job, and in 10 days I was on an airplane flying off to Boston.
Oh, my goodness.
Flying off to Boston, and I was being given a secondary education as how to be an insurance adjuster.
Oh, yeah.
Because an insurance adjuster had to receive claims from a policyholder to investigate an accident that might have determine who is at fault,
Right.
and to determine all of the problems that needed to be solved, considering whether or not a lawsuit would be filed or not to be filed, and all that sort of stuff.
Well, that was a challenge to you too, wasn't
That
it?
was a real challenge, and interested in, it was, just fit my personality and my
Perfect.
feeling as perfect.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful.
Just-
Now, we're talking about the 1930s, are we?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
1936 was when I graduated from college,
I see.
and it was led right into that. So I received the necessary training, which was really pre-law training. I had to understand the law and doing my work as an investigator and adjuster for
Right.
Liberty Mutual Insurance Company. And I was interested to the first case that I investigated after my training happened to be a lawsuit at an intersection where it was an open intersection, except the person on the right-of-way had the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And investigated that accident and sat with the attorney when the case was tried in court. And I had interviewed, I'd canvassed the intersection and determined whether or not there were any witnesses to that. Interviewed this young lady that came down. She said she came down, heard something that happened, came downstairs to see what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, eventually that case was tried in court, and that woman came down, took the stand, and testified that she saw the whole accident. Was telling a lie on the stand.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my gosh.
So those are the things that kind of happened
Sure.
along the way.
Yes, I should say. Well, then, of course, that was in the depths of the Great Depression.
Yes. it was.
And then along, in everybody's life, there are certain times that you never forget where you were when it happened. Where were you, and how did you hear about the news on December the 7th, 1941? The attack on Pearl Harbor.
I was on the news at that time. I was. It was about 11 o'clock at night on Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
and I heard the news at that time.
What did you think about it? Did you anticipate military service?
I didn't anticipate it, no. Didn't anticipate it at all.
Yeah. You were in your 20s by that time,
Oh, yes,
and
about 25.
right. And you registered for the draft?
I was, yes.
And so you had a draft number, and they were going to call you up, or what? What was the situation there?
I have to recall. I recall that I don't recall being registered,
Okay.
but I did volunteer to serve
Mm-hmm.
at the time
You volunteered in the Army?
in the Navy.
In the Navy? Oh, great,
Yeah.
great. Well, well, those were very exciting times, as we all well remember. And
It's interesting to note that after I graduated from college, I didn't know really what I was going to do. So I, at that time, applied to serve in the Navy, or
In the reserve?
in the Air Force.
Oh, Naval Air Force.
And they turned me down because I had defective eye vision,
Ah, I see.
so I didn't get into that. So that
Where were you sent for naval training?
I was sent for training in Fort Knox or Fort Schuyler, New York.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah, Fort Schuyler, New York, and I was sent from basic training into Frederick, Maryland,
Uh-huh.
to go to in training in the intelligence unit of the Navy. So my first designation in the Navy was IVS, Intelligence Volunteer Specialist.
Oh, my
That
goodness.
was my designation in the Navy when I got into that business there. I was in there probably in that particular unit for 6, 8 months when they needed me in another unit. So that my designations were transferred to deck officer.
Oh, yes.
So I was a lieutenant in the, I was ensign at that time,
Right.
transferred into the deck category
Mm-hmm.
and was given orders to serve under the admiral in the Atlantic Ocean in Bermuda.
Oh,
So there I served under him for about 3 years. 3 years.
really?
Had a wonderful time there.
Did you have any shipboard experience?
The only shipboard experience was when I traveled to that job from the States to
Okay. I understand.
so
So you didn't have too much chance to get seasick or anything like that?
so I was put into the office under the admiral as an operation officer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was my job to serve under him in that capacity, to assign units for ships for operating around the area in the Atlantic at that
Right.
time,
Right.
air as well as surface. Had an interesting accident that happened in Bermuda, tragic accident there, that at that time, you know, our planes were served, you landed on the right side. And in Bermuda, it was English, and it was reversed at that time. And a tragic thing happened when we forgot that
About that, yeah.
and we collided with another plane in that landing.
Yeah. Right.
One of the tragedies.
Right.
But I was in there in Bermuda for 3 years as an operation officer. And
Well, that's pretty good duty.
it was, yes.
Beautiful Bermuda.
It's interesting to note that I was on board at the time when the German sub that we were able to capture,
Mm-hmm.
where we had a lot of submarine activity from
Right.
Germany at the time.
Submarine patrol and so forth.
Our aircraft was able to as well as surface craft, were able to
Detect the enemy and so forth.
capture the submarine, German submarine, before it was sunk.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that submarine was towed into the harbor of Bermuda. And if you go to Chicago and look at the museum there in Chicago, you'll find that German sub that was brought up at that time in the Chicago Museum of Art.
I didn't realize that that came from being captured in off Bermuda.
That's true.
That's a wonderful display there in Chicago.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, how about that?
You've seen that.
Yeah, yeah. Been aboard it, you know, they let you go through parts of it. Well, so you were part of that operation of bringing it to Chicago? Or was
Yeah.
that after the war?
No, that was during the war.
That was during the war.
Yeah.
How about that? Wow. Well, of course, that was a tremendous bit of information, wasn't it, for us to learn about that kind of a
Yes.
enemy submarine?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did they capture German personnel with that operation?
Yes, we did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the captain of that submarine was housed in Bermuda for 6, 8, 10 months. I don't know what happened, how long, because he was hurt at the time.
Right.
So that's an interesting experience.
Well, I should say so. That's fascinating. So 3 years, that would bring you up into probably 1945. Is that right? That you were still there in Bermuda?
44, I think.
44. Okay. Did you have other duty after Bermuda?
I was sent to San Diego with the idea that I would be going to the Pacific in
Right.
some capacity. And at that time, the Japanese gave up,
Yeah.
and I was discharged. And
Where were you when you heard the news about the atomic bomb being dropped in Japan? Were you still in Bermuda at that time, or were you in San Diego?
I was in San Diego.
You were in San Diego. Boy, that was a beautiful place to be.
Yeah.
San Diego,
Yeah.
Southern California.
Yeah, I was in there for about 6 months, and things gave up, so
Yeah. Were you stationed on North Island there in San Diego?
yes.
Oh boy, I was too at one time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was very, very interesting. What rank did you achieve?
Lieutenant,
Full lieutenant,
yes.
2 stripes.
Yep.
Right. A lot of people are confused, you know. It's the equivalent of a captain in the Army or a captain in the Marine Corps. The same elevation of rank.
Yeah.
Well, while you were there in San Diego, what was your main duty?
In San Diego, I was kind of hanging around,
I see.
waiting
For the future, yeah.
next step. And that's when I was discharged there.
Now, were you married at that time?
No, I was not married.
So you had bachelor quarters there.
I did, yes.
BOQ. Oh, that's interesting.
I had a wonderful time. I was pals with a young man who was younger than I am, and yet he was served in the during the war to collect money. You know, he was a lieutenant
Mm-hmm.
in the Navy, but all he did was to go around and collect money.
Oh, you mean the bond drives?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because he had earned a lot of money before he was
Uh-huh.
he did that job.
He was experienced at
He
it.
was experienced at it.
Well, that's pretty good duty, too.
We became good friends, and he was a friend of all the big shots, the movie actors and
Oh,
actors.
my.
Right there, and
Sure. Did you get,
so we had a lot of fun.
I'll bet you did. Did
together.
you got into Hollywood, did you?
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the people you met.
Oh, I can't remember the actors and
Uh-huh.
actresses, but I met a few of them.
But you had a good time there,
I had
didn't
a good
you?
time for a few months,
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
just a few months.
Well, and of course there were so many people from the Hollywood community who went into the service, you know, and served their countries well.
That's true.
And Gary Cooper and so forth and so on. Well,
Well, it was an interesting time when I met some interesting people.
and you were a farm boy from northeastern Ohio.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
had an interesting life up to that point.
You certainly did, I should say so. Well, now, so the war came to an end, and did you get out right away, or did you stay in the reserves, or what happened?
I did. I stayed in the reserves for 7 years
Uh-huh.
after that, yes. I
Oh,
did.
yeah.
I took my training in the summertime
Mm-hmm.
to continue that.
Right. Where did you do your training?
I did it at various places, and some in Connecticut, Rhode Island for one time, and down in the Caribbean another time, and then another time on Lake Michigan,
Mm-hmm.
to various places.
Sure, sure. So did you get into the Pacific at all?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
That's very interesting, because all my experience was in the Pacific, and I had no experience in the Atlantic. Well, I always wanted to get into the Atlantic, but they never transferred me. So at the end of 7 years, of course, through that period of your reserve service, you were a businessman, right?
Yes,
You were back in the insurance business,
yes, I was. I turned it in.
and you acted as an investigator and adjuster?
Well, only took me 3 years to become, to get off the streets as investigator and into a management position, supervisor of the work that was being done on the outside. And
Right.
I handled the lawsuit end of the thing.
Did you have is there any outstanding suit besides that first one I mean, in your post-war experience, that stands out as extraordinary?
Well, I think might say that almost all of them were extraordinary.
Were they?
But
Yeah.
when you're in law and you're working in that business, why, they're always very interesting and important.
Yes, of course, of course. Did you go into the practice of law?
I did not. No, I didn't. Not at that time. Of course, I worked up into it And you might say in that capacity, you're into the law as well.
Right, exactly, of course, of course. Well, I think it's interesting, Orson, because of your age, because when I was, like, for example, when I was 20 years old, you were 28.
Yes.
And 28 years old in wartime in the Navy was an old man. I mean, we had,
Relatively.
we regarded 28 years old as old people. How strange that was.
Yeah.
That changed very quickly when we got to be 28.
Right.
Well, so you stayed out in Southern California, did you?
Not for long, no. I moved right back to my job with Liberty Mutual in Detroit, Michigan.
In Detroit, oh boy,
Yeah.
right.
And of course, by that time, my oldest son, David Wade, was with me, and so that was a time that, of course, he was born when I was overseas,
Right,
and when I really got to know him was when he was 18 months of age.
is that so?
I had visited him, I guess once or twice in between that.
Shortly after he was
But-
born.
About 18 months, I
Uh-huh.
should say. 18 months is when I connected with him.
Well, how about your wife? Was she from your hometown, or where did you meet your wife?
Oh, I met her in Florida.
Oh yeah,
I had a couple of young bachelors. I was 25 at the time, and we decided, well, maybe we ought to start looking around for somebody permanent.
right.
So I went to Florida with two of my friends, and happened to be in Florida that I met Ophelia. I
Okay.
mean, Florine,
Okay.
and she happened to be from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Is that so? How about that?
So in another 6 months, I was attached to Florine
Uh-huh.
as marriage.
Very nice, very nice.
There was a time in my life, 25 years old, I should go on and do something else.
Right. I understand, I understand.
So
And so when was David born?
David was born in 13, or not 13, not,
33?
yeah,
No?
yeah, 43,
43,
yeah, 1943.
right. Well, of course, you were very proud to have a boy and somebody to carry on the family
Yes,
name. That's wonderful. So now, being in Detroit, that was a very, very exciting time in that city of automobiles and so forth. I'm sure that you had some very interesting experiences in Detroit.
Oh, Detroit, in those days, was a wonderful city,
Yes.
and I enjoyed it very much. Had some good friends there.
Did you live in the city?
We lived in the city, yeah. Had Hyde Park was a section of the city where we lived there. And it was a wonderful city at that time.
And you were with Liberty Mutual at that time?
Yes,
Okay. Did you stay with Liberty Mutual throughout your career?
I did.
Oh, wow, that's unusual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how long were you in Detroit?
10 years.
Uh-huh.
I was in Detroit 10 years, and then I opened an office in Kalamazoo, Michigan, for Liberty Mutual. And I was in Kalamazoo, Michigan for 10 years. Kalamazoo was just a wonderful, wonderful city. I was celebrated with my family in the newspapers when I moved there. Got pictures there how we were celebrated as a family moving to
A new location, right?
Kalamazoo.
Right, right. And how much of a family did you have there in Kalamazoo?
I had three.
Three.
At the time, all three of them were born.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's very interesting. The your career as a businessman was very, very important. I'm sure you participated in community affairs and so forth.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I was a member of the Congregational Church. Actually, my wife was a Catholic, so she went to her Catholic church. And
Uh-huh.
I continued to participate in my Congregational church.
Right.
Happened to be that my family followed me into the congregational end of the faith
Uh-huh.
of Jesus Christ. Both had good relationship
Right.
all through our side.
Well, that's wonderful. That's just wonderful. Well, now, you said you were in Kalamazoo for about 10 years. Then what happened after that?
After Kalamazoo, I decided that my company, Liberty Mutual, wanted me to move to Cincinnati. Kalamazoo, I was manager, and I had half a dozen outside adjusters working for me and inside office staff there. Cincinnati was a larger operation, so I agreed to move to Cincinnati. That's how I became a Cincinnatian.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh. That's interesting. Well, yeah, that must have been an interesting move for you.
I moved to a bigger city, yes.
Well, it's a great city.
Well, it's interesting that while I was moving back and forth from Kalamazoo to Cincinnati, my son David was in college at the time in Eastern Michigan University, and but anyway, at that time too, my son Kenneth Irving Peck, incidentally, I named him after a friend of mine who was the president of Hiram College, Kenneth Irving Brown. His name was given Kenneth Irving Peck,
Mm-hmm.
because
He was your second son?
My lifelong friend we continued to be friends, although he was 15 years my senior. We were lifelong friends for
Right.
the rest of our life.
I understand. Sure. So this was your second son?
This is my first, David.
Oh, David. Okay.
David was my first son, but
Yeah.
of course, Kenneth Irwin was my second one.
Yes. So you've been in Cincinnati now since the 1960s?
I moved there in, yeah, that was it.
That's about it.
60.
I'm figuring the 20 years there, Chicago, Detroit, and Kalamazoo.
Yeah.
And you moved into Clifton then, did you? Or where did you settle in Cincinnati?
No, I didn't move to Clifton. Let's see, moved to this area. We moved into Kentucky, northern Kentucky.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, we lived into Covington, Kentucky.
Right across the river. Right.
Across the river. Moved there because it was so handy to come down from the hill where we lived and bought a house there in Price Hill, not Price Hill, but anyway in Covington. And I could come into downtown Cincinnati, my office, in just 10 minutes.
Wow.
Wonderful. Rather than to move into a suburb of Cincinnati, it was more convenient to come from that direction.
Made sense.
10 minutes, I could be in my office,
How about that?
downtown Cincinnati.
I should say that that's very
Wonderful move to be in Kentucky with my family.
right.
To
I
be-
should say.
To raise my family there, and
So you had the two sons, and then did you have any more children?
I had my daughter
Oh.
married Denise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And she of course went to school, continued to go to school in northern Kentucky.
Right. Right. Well, that's.
So I had my second two were Kentuckians.
Mm-hmm. I know that. Well, your position here in Cincinnati was very important, and of course, I'm sure you were a great producer for Liberty Mutual.
Yes, I did well there.
That's wonderful. That's just great. And so now you're up in let's see, you're up in well up into your 50s by this time.
I guess so.
Something like that. I just figured 1930 to 1913 up, but
Old enough anyway.
were you looking ahead to retirement? Was there an age at which you were expected to retire from the company?
No, really not. I wasn't looking forward to retiring at all. I enjoyed the work.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it very much.
that's the important thing.
It was an important work. Continued it in my practice of
Right.
insurance practice. And,
How large an office did Liberty Mutual have here?
well, it was a large office. I had a large secretary of staff. I had inside women that were working as inside adjusters that could handle claims by
Right.
phone and by correspondence. Then, of course, we had a couple of dozen or so adjusters working
Right.
outside. I had assistant supervisors working under me as manager, that sort of thing.
Did you ever spend any time, so to speak, in Boston? That was the main base, wasn't it, of Liberty Mutual?
No, I didn't spend any time except I went to Boston and meetings.
Right, right. I understand. Okay. Well, let's go back a little bit, Orson. Do you remember, can you think of any more incidents during the war, during your naval service, as a deck officer or as an investigator or anything like that, besides the submarine encounter?
No, that's about it.
That was about it. Okay, yeah. Well, that's interesting, and I'm glad you got to go to Southern California too. That was a nice experience too, especially from up in the northeast corner of Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah, San Diego was a wonderful place in those days. Fleet City and all that sort of thing. The Navy and the Marines were everywhere. You saw ships come into port and so forth.
Oh, yes.
Did you get aboard any of the big ships, battleships, cruisers, aircraft carriers, anything like that?
Only as a visitor.
I see. I see. Well, now with your 3 children, did everybody stay here in northern Kentucky, Cincinnati, or did they spread out your family?
At what time?
After you moved from Kalamazoo to northern Kentucky, after they graduated from school,
Oh, yes.
your sons and your daughter.
Well, I tried to get, of course, and my son David selected his own school with my guidance, I think, and he decided Eastern Michigan University was his school of choice, which is a good school.
Right.
And then my son Kenneth, I thought he might well like to go to Hiram College. And so I enrolled him there, and he didn't do well at Hiram because for various reasons he didn't adjust himself there very well, or wasn't welcome. In his words today, he was not welcomed at Hiram College, so that he didn't. He was there for a year.
Yeah. Well, it was much smaller, of course, than Eastern Michigan, I would imagine.
Well, yeah. Well, that was my second son.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And how about your daughter?
My daughter went to college in Kentucky,
Uh-huh.
at the University of Kentucky.
Oh, down in Lexington.
She was there for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
She moved on to other things after that point,
Right.
which
Right.
was good for her.
And you have grandchildren?
I have grandchildren, yes. My grandchildren are wonderful, have been wonderful for me.
Right. Right. Now, is your wife still with you?
My wife is, I wasn't successful in my marriage with my my son and daughter mother.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, she became disabled
Oh,
at a
I'm
point
sorry.
in her life.
I'm sorry.
So they,
Well, you know, you really have had a very, very, very interesting life. And you know what is wonderful? What you have established in your family, a spirit and a dedication. I'm sure that, like most of us, you're proud of your country. You're proud of your service, and that's very important. What you did in World War II. Because, you know, that was the seminal period of the whole 20th century. There was nothing in the whole 20th century that could supersede World War II.
well, see, I think it's really been the last war that we've had
Yeah.
of importance. We have been in wars.
Of the traditional wars, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. Well, Orson, I think it's been great. You've been a fine interviewee. You remember things well, and I know that your family and people who will see this DVD of our interview will be very, very pleased to hear your story and hear about your experiences. And we thank you very much for...
Well, one thing that I should probably mention is a couple of years before we retired from Liberty Mutual, I decided to go back to the farm. So I bought a farm in Hamilton area.
Uh-huh.
In the Hamilton area of the state, bought a 100-acre farm there. And my son David worked with me a little bit on that farm because it was being used as pasture.
I see.
Time, and David and I went into that together.
That's
And,
interesting.
we both made money on that farm.
Good. Excellent.
We subdivided the place in part, and I developed it in the very first, so that if you look on the map now, you'll see the map, and that area was Peck's Place.
I'll be
So
darned.
you look on the map there, you'll see Peck's Place. That's where we established it by. So that we had an interesting experience
Yeah.
together, and
Right.
I had an experience with my continuing on in my life in that farm, and my family has always enjoyed,
I'm sure.
and
you
their,
had-
their kids enjoyed that place being out there
Oh, I
because
can...
we had horses and
Sure.
cows and so forth.
Yeah.
I had raised a few horses there.
Great.
Just had fun.
Sure.
Just had a good fun.
Well, you have provided for your family so well, and they're all great citizens, and you are too. And I want to thank you for the opportunity
Well,
to meet you.
I thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so
Appreciate it very
much. You and your family are going to enjoy seeing this.
I hope so.
Okay.